Fuel trim. What is the difference, and which is more important? If you've ever had a medical issue that required a visit to your doctor, the first thing they do is get your vital signs. And these vital signs are indicators of how your body is functioning. Well, fuel trim are the indicators of how your engine is functioning. As we look at fuel trim, it indicates that the fuel mixture has either a rich exhaust or a lean exhaust. Now let's quickly review how fuel trim works. Fresh air comes in, fuel is sprayed, and then combustion occurs. All of that goes out the exhaust and past the oxygen sensor. Now the oxygen sensor reports back to the computer. The computer's job is to balance the air-fuel mixture, so it recalculates. And it decides if more or less fuel is needed to keep it in balance. And then another breath of fresh air comes in, fuel is sprayed, and now the computer has to recalculate, and it's either going to add or it's going to subtract a certain amount of fuel in order to balance. And the amount of fuel is then added and combustion occurs again. The oxygen sensor then reports back to the computer, and this happens over and over and over again. All of this happens very, very fast. In fact, it happens with each breath of air that the piston takes, and the PCM recalculates with each breath. Add in the fact that the engine may have 4, 6, or 8 cylinders, and you drive at different speeds and under various conditions. So you can see how fast this recalculating actually is. Now let me rephrase that. You can see how fast this short-term fuel recalculating actually is. Now we call that short-term fuel trim, with the key word here being short. Even from day one, when your car is brand new, driving conditions are constantly changing. Hills, curves, altitude, and traffic. All these things require adjustments to the balance of the air-fuel mixture. These constant adjustments to air-fuel mixture are perfectly normal. That's how it's designed to work. That's how it should be. This is short-term fuel trim. It's normal, and it will keep your engine in balance. Fuel trim is designed to balance. When it can't keep that balance, it sets a code. So, fuel trim looks like this. Balancing is a constant effort. If you look at it on a lap scope or a graph of your scanner data, it would look like this, up and down, up and down. Now I want to zoom in right here and show you that the short term is shown in the blue color and the long term is shown in the red color. As you can see, there is a difference. Let's talk about that difference. The difference between short term and long term. They are both switching, only not at the same speed. Now the blue line is the short term recalculating after every breath of air. The graph changes every time that the PCM adds or subtracts fuel, and it recalculates very, very rapidly. Now, how does the PCM add or subtract fuel? Well, simply by increasing or decreasing the injector on time. Now notice here the percentage is decreasing on the left side of the screen. In this case, the injector on time is constantly decreasing by varying percentage amounts, and the computer is reducing the fuel injector on time with every pulse. So the air-fuel mixture must be lean or too much air because it's reducing fuel. Now the red line is the long-term recalculating. Yes, long-term fuel trim recalculates also. Now let's look at this again. Now the red line may look like it is recalculating slower, but it's not slower. The scanner doesn't slow down for different data. It's just not as often and in smaller intervals. Now this is something you need to know. Long-term fuel trim does not change the injector on time directly. Short-term does that. Short-term actually changes the injector on time. Long-term fuel trim changes the trim strategy. Trim strategy? What is that? So fuel trim strategy is this: thinking through a problem, making a plan of action, and then managing the air-fuel mixture. And that plan of action is designed to achieve a goal, and that goal is stoichiometric 14.7 to 1, or in other words, a balanced air-fuel mixture. And this is achieved through what we call fuel mapping. You see, our driving conditions and habits are always changing. Now, we never see this, but automotive mathematicians, engineers, and scientists, they all figured this out ahead of time, and they developed these fuel maps for us. When the vehicle is designed, the engineers look at all of these data inputs: the mass airflow, the oxygen sensor, TPS, map sensor, and the vehicle speed. And they've considered all of the various possibilities, and they've created fuel maps, sometimes referred to as tables. Now, fortunately for us, they've done all of this ahead of time. And the fuel maps look something like this. Now, don't get lost here. Let me show you how simple this is. And remember, we never see this, or we don't even use it. It's all done for us ahead of time. Now, notice how the 14.7 to 1 appears right in the middle of the screen. And it also appears at various other points on the fuel map. And this is all normal. Now remember, long-term fuel trim does not directly change the fuel injector pulse width. It changes the strategy to achieve stoichiometric 14.7 to 1. And the instructions to do that are pre-calculated inside each cell. So the red line, the long-term fuel trim, changes the cell every time that the short-term fuel trim exceeds the 10% limit, either positively or negatively. And it's always trying to achieve our stoichiometric 14.7 to 1. Now remember, I said that the short-term fuel trim recalculated with every breath of air from the engine, and it can do that all day long. In fact, it's supposed to. But it is limited to how much of an adjustment it can make because of the cell it is currently in. Now this illustrates a single cell. It starts at 0% or no adjustment. When the oxygen sensor reports that the exhaust is lean, the computer calculates how much fuel is needed to bring it back into balance, and it issues a go rich command and increases the fuel injector pulse width. Now suddenly, because of that additional fuel, the oxygen sensor sees it and reports that the exhaust is now rich. The computer tries to balance again and issues a go lean command, and it then subtracts fuel. Now remember, I said it can do this all day long. In fact, it's supposed to, within limits. And those limits are 10%. So short term has either a negative or positive 10% limit. This is one cell, or one set of instructions. Long-term adjustments change the cell, which changes the instructions. Any adjustments more or less than 10% in either direction exceed the limits of the short-term fuel trim, and the long-term then steps in to help. Now this continues until the combined adjustment of both the short-term and the long-term are more than 25%. At that point, the computer can no longer make normal adjustments and it needs help, so it sets a code. So in your diagnostics, why not look at long-term fuel trim first? Because it's like the vital signs of how healthy our engine is. Instead of wondering what to spend your time on or what to check first, what are the vital signs telling you? If you look at long-term fuel trim first, you'll know if the PCM is successfully doing its job or if it's struggling to keep the air-fuel mixture balanced. If it's struggling, it indicates if the fuel mixture is rich or lean. And then we'll know which side of the struggle we need to focus on. Why is it rich or why is it lean? Remember, short-term adjustments won't turn on the check engine light. A long-term adjustment will, and it gives us an indication of how severe a problem we have. So what have you learned? If you would like to test yourself, here's a 10-question quiz for you. The answers are in the video, or if you'd like, email me a request and I'll send you the answers. My email is in the comments.
What controls the air input? What controls the fuel input? The computer's job in fuel trim is? What are the three elements involved in achieving a balanced fuel trim? What does the oxygen sensor do? What does the computer do? What does the fuel injector do? What is a fuel trim code? What changes with short-term fuel adjustments? What changes with long-term fuel adjustments?